On February 3rd, 1959, a Beechcraft Bonanza crashed near Clear Lake, Iowa, killing all four occupants of the aircraft. Among those on the plane were Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper. Dubbed "The Day the Music Died," this plane crash has become the topic of many songs and has come up in films and other works of fiction. Buddy Holly was a pioneer in the rock and roll era of the 50s. He originally started in a band called The Crickets, but later split from them. Going solo with songs such as Peggy Sue, Every Day, and I'm Gonna Love You Too, he is a widely known figure in the world of 50s rock. With this newfound fame, he decided to go on tour. He invited many artists to go on this tour, including new up-and-coming artist Richie Valens, J.P. Richardson, and the vocal group Dion and the Belmonts. Along with these people, Holly created his own band consisting of himself, Waylon Jennings, Tommy Alsop, and Carl Bunch. The tour was set to hit 24 cities in the Midwest, but there were many problems along the way. The group would take refurbished school buses to all of the cities. However, due to the winter climate of the Midwestern United States, the cold weather would often cause problems and even ended up giving Valens and Richardson flu-like symptoms, while Brunch was hospitalized for severe frostbite on his feet. On the 2nd of February, 1959, the group arrived in Clear Lake, Iowa to perform a last-minute setup for the next show. It wasn't a scheduled stop on the tour, but the tour promoters wanted to fill up the open date and decided that the city would be the best bet. After the performance was done, Holly was informed of further problems with the bus and was very upset. The next city in the tour was Moorhead, Minnesota, over 360 miles away. Fed up with the bus problems, he chartered a flight to fly to Fargo, North Dakota, which is adjacent to the city of Moorhead. The company that Holly chartered the flight from was a company by the name of Dwyer Flying Service, owned by Hubert Jerry Dwyer. The company operated out of Mason City, Iowa, not too far from where the tour had just stopped. The plane that would be flown on that fateful day was a Beechcraft Bonanza, registered as November 37904 November. It was a small single-engine plane that could only fit 3 passengers and the pilot. The pilot that was flying the plane that day was 21-year-old Roger Peterson, a man who was described as, quote, a young married man who built his life around flying, end quote. He had just over 700 flying hours, 128 of which were on Bonanzas. The original passenger list of the plane is disputed, as there are multiple accounts of who was originally going to be flying on the flight. We do know that Buddy Holly was one of the original 3, however, it is disputed as to who the other 2 were. The most widely accepted account is that Waylon Jennings and Tommy Alsop were originally to fly with Holly, but Richardson had contracted the flu and had asked to take Jennings' seat. Valens, who used to have a fear of flying, asked to take Alsop's seat. It's unclear as to his reasoning why. The 2 flipped a coin for the seat, and Valens won the toss. He is supposedly said to have remarked, quote, that's the first time I've ever won anything in my life, end quote. There is another account, however, that came from Dion, the lead vocalist of Dion and the Belmonts. According to him, Holly had taken him, Valens, and Richardson into an empty dressing room and asked them if they'd like to go on the plane, but there were only 2 seats available. In his account, he stated that Valens was the one who had fallen ill, and the 2 did the coin toss instead. Apparently, Dion had won the coin toss, but decided that the fare was too expensive, so he gave up the seat to Valens. Either way, one thing is clear. The 3 musicians that were on that plane were unknowingly headed to their twisted fate. The plane took off from Mason City Municipal Airport at 12:55 a.m. Central Standard Time. The weather report from that day showed that there was light snow and a visibility of 6 miles. Dwyer, the owner of the charter company, watched the plane take off as normal from runway 17, now runway 18. He recalled seeing the aircraft's tail light for most of the short flight, seeing it climb and turn to its assigned heading before slowly descending until it eventually disappeared. Repeated attempts to establish radar contact were made, but the efforts returned nothing. Later that morning, Dwyer decided to take another plane to retrace the plane's flight path and spotted the wreckage within minutes. The plane had crashed into a cornfield less than 6 miles from the airport. Dwyer alerted the sheriff's office, who raced to the scene. During this time period, the Investigation Board for Aviation Incidents was known as the Civil Aeronautics Board, or CAB. It was the precursor to the NTSB. Their investigation revealed that the plane had impacted the ground at a high speed, in a steep bank to the right, and in a nose-down attitude. The right wing struck the ground first, causing the plane to cartwheel across the field for 540 feet before coming up to rest against a wire fence along the owner of the cornfield's property. Both Holly and Valens' bodies were ejected from the fuselage and were near the wreckage, while Richardson's body was thrown over the fence into the yard of the neighboring property. The pilot's body was entangled in the wreckage. All 4 victims died instantly, suffering numerous fatal injuries to their heads and other areas of their bodies. The cause of the crash was determined to be the lack of qualification of the pilot. Peterson had logged 52 hours of instrument flight training. However, he was not yet qualified to fly in poor conditions that required instrument flight. Peterson, as well as the charter company, were only allowed to fly using visual flight rules, but on that night it would have been virtually impossible to fly without instruments due to the poor visibility and the clouds. Peterson had also failed an instrument check ride 9 months earlier, and his training was done with newer instruments that were not in the aircraft being flown that day. Essentially, he shouldn't have been flying that day. His poor choices and lack of qualifications resulted in the deaths of all 4 occupants. Buddy Holly's wife, Maria Elena, found out about his death through a news report. She had been pregnant at the time, but due to the traumatic event, unfortunately suffered a miscarriage. Holly's mother heard the news on the radio and reportedly screamed and collapsed. These 2 incidents caused officials to rethink their information release protocols and developed new protocols to ensure that the names of victims were to be withheld until the families were notified. Despite the deaths of the 3 musicians, the tour continued and carried on for 2 more weeks. 15-year-old Bobby V was given the task of filling in for Holly at the next performance in Moorhead, and after that, Jennings would take Holly's place as lead singer. Funerals were held for the victims individually. Holly and Richardson were buried in Texas, Valens in California, and Peterson in Iowa. Holly's wife didn't attend his funeral, as she blamed herself for his death. She said, quote, "In a way, I blame myself. I was not feeling well when he left. I was 2 weeks pregnant, and I wanted Buddy to stay with me, but he had scheduled that tour. It was the only time I wasn't with him. And I blame myself because I know that, if only I had gone along, Buddy never would have gotten into that airplane." 3 monuments have been set up to commemorate the lives of those in the plane. 2 are in Iowa, and 1 is in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where the last official show was performed. Many songs have been made to retell the event and its impact on the people who lived during it, the most famous being Don McLean's American Pie. Other songs include 3 Stars by Tommy D, Tribute to Buddy Holly by Mike Berry, a small reference to the incident in A Long Time Ago by Waylon Jennings, and references in the song Hug My Radiator by Dion. While the song didn't directly reference the musicians, Dion stated in later interviews that it was a memory of the tour and how he almost got on the plane that night. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I've decided to begin posting more video documentaries in the future, mainly about aviation incidents and other topics that I'm passionate about. I'm taking inspiration from one of my favorite YouTube channels, Disaster Breakdown, about the formatting and presentation of my videos. I'll be experimenting with this video as well as some future ones to begin developing my own presentation styles. If you'd like to support me and my content in the future, consider subscribing to the channel so you can get updated when I post new videos. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.